So thank you so much, Valerie and Scott, for this invitation to give a Dhamma talk, and for each and every one of you to be here tonight, both in person and in the cloud. And it's such a busy time of the year. So I'm deeply grateful that all of you are investing your time to listen to a Zen talk. And as you know, a Zen talk is not something that you have to remember every word that was ever said, but just open your hearts and listen to what touches you. And for the rest, just forget about it. So I want to speak about a shining light in the darkness tonight. Zen is to enlighten our heart and our mind and to see its true nature. So heart and mind, as most of you know, is one and the same word in Chinese and Japanese, the kokoro. And this is how the sixth patriarch, Enno in China, or Huinen, put it. So what we translate as to enlighten or enlightening is the Chinese character Ming, and it's composed of two characters, the moon and the sun. And it means it's shedding a great bright light. It is illuminating. And so in this season of darkness, I think some of you may have attained the Rohatsu session of this darkest time of the year. And we are coming up to Christmas and also Hanukkah. They are celebrated at the same time of the year. I would like to address darkness and light, give some pointers to how they feed our practice of seeing our true nature. So as we approach Christmas, which, as I said, coincides with Hanukkah this year, the readings in the Hebrew scripture lots of them are based on the sayings or the writings of the prophet Isaiah. And this verse is very famous, and you have probably heard it before. It goes as follows. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelled in a land of deep darkness, on them a light has shone. And that's also quoted in the Gospel of Matthew, where it says, the people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light. For those dwelling in the region and shadow of death, on them a light has dawned. So, who are the people walking in darkness? Who is that referring to? And what is that darkness? And who has seen a great light? Is that talking about the past? But we know from our Zen practice that the past is past. It's no longer here. So the only time that exists is right here and right now. So this text of Isaiah is not speaking about some distant time or people, but about us, everyone of us here. Or would there be anyone among us who has never walked in darkness? If that's the case, raise your hand. So what's that darkness referring to? I think all of us could come up really with a long list of dark things, which the Buddha refers to as dukkha or suffering. Some time ago, I heard a talk by Hogan Bays of the Great Vow Monastery in Portland, in which he translated dukkha or suffering as challenge. And I think certainly this dukkha or suffering that we experience, both on the personal level and then also on the level of society and the world, is a challenge to each and every one of us. It really challenges to go deeper into our practice, to see, to experience that light of our true nature, and then to address the challenge from that place. But then it says in Isaiah's verse that we have already seen the light, that it has shone upon us, or as it says in Matthew, it has dawned upon us. So as we are walking in that darkness, we are already inseparable from, we are already one with that light. So what's the darkness again? Darkness is really that we don't know who we truly are, what we truly are. And the Buddha refers to that as delusion or ignorance. And so that ignorance causes the greed, the ill will, the pride, and also the mistrust, the results of which they are called the 5 poisons in Buddhism, but we encounter the results of this mix on a global scale every day when we put on the news. We have these continuing wars in Ukraine, the Middle East, Sudan, Eritrea, Haiti, just to name a few. We have all those victims, these orphans, the streams of refugees, and then also these unusual weather events caused by global warming, from which no one is spared anymore. I've heard from the locals around here that this winter is also really warm, that there is no snow, and that's a great concern, also for the trees and the whole of nature. And so then if we look at our own families, maybe there is the darkness of parents or siblings no longer speaking to each other, or there is the darkness of loneliness, which we often fail to see even though it's such an epidemic. So one example of that would be my own mother who lived in Germany. She was widowed at age 80 and insisted always on staying in her own house, never complaining or even mention anything about loneliness. And then at age 86, she started losing her memory, and we needed to get a Polish helper for her to help in the house. And she was completely against that. And I called her the day from the States after the helper, her name was Barbara, arrived, and asked her how it is going. And she said, now I no longer fall into that dark hole that I always fell into when any one of you children left. Because Barbara is here now. And I was completely shocked. You know, my mother had never spoken about any dark hole before. So there is not only an epidemic of loneliness, but also depression, especially rising in young people. They're so stressed out, often worn out by social media, and they are despairing, they're losing hope. And then there's a darkness of illness, poverty, evictions, racism. There's a darkness of heartbreak in so many forms. Henry, in one of his talks, offered his stunning poem on darkness a few weeks ago. So he spoke about the darkness under the frozen lake. Speaking about those who break through the frozen surface and fall into that darkness, there is no consolation. And then he added, there doesn't have to be any consolation. So the people who dwelt in darkness have seen a great light. Might there be any positive meaning to that darkness as well? So of course, in the Christian tradition, that verse of Isaiah is interpreted as referring to the birth of the Messiah, Jesus, the child in the manger, which the people around the world are celebrating at Christmas. And Handel's Messiah takes that account from the Gospel of Luke in telling the story of the shepherds. It goes as follows. There were shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flocks by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said to them, fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. So the sky at night, that luminous darkness without which we wouldn't even be able to see the stars and the moon. We don't see that during the daylight, only at night. So in one of his poems, the late Shigeto Oshida, who was a Japanese Zen teacher and Catholic priest, and also the founder of the Takamori hermitage in the Japanese Alps, which was a place that was attended by countless seekers, spiritual seekers from Japan and around the world. I personally heard first about Father Oshida from a participant in our retreats in Israel, a young woman who had lived in that hermitage for half a year. So anyway, in his poem, he is describing that shepherd's sky, and he says the following: shepherd's heaven, infinite above, far distant from every thought, far beyond life's agenda. I breathe deeply the incoming breeze, enjoying just to be. Holocaust of ashes and dust, life's oblation, praise and surrender. So, what is that in us that is far distant from my every ordinary thought, far beyond life's agenda? Is it not this dimension of our true self that is unborn, just like the sky, luminous, empty, and therefore no boundaries whatsoever? It's not stained nor pure, neither waxing nor waning, as the Heart Sutra is telling us. So that dimension of the empty, infinite, which we can never fully describe in language, which is beyond any words and letters we could ever find, is right here, intimate. With every life-giving breath that we take, just breathing in and out, as Father Oshida says, enjoying to be. And then he says, our whole breath, this incoming breeze, our whole being, is a holocaust, meaning an offering of stardust and ashes. And so, of course, stardust and ashes is the stuff that we are made of, this physical self of ours. The whole universe is made of. All those before us and those who will come after us are made of too. It's what we return to. With each breath that we take in this whole universe. And then we give it back with each out-breath as an act of praise, he says, thanksgiving, surrender. Surrender of what? Surrender of the small I, me, mine with all of its agendas. So then that darkness really refers to that fertile, sky-like dimension of our being, that state of heart and mind that's free of any agenda, free from discriminating thought. It's also called that state of non-thinking, not wanting, not knowing, which opens us to that glory shining all around us. Each and every one of your faces, the candle, the flowers, Nancy, the mat, the floor, right there, right now. And one important element of that fertile darkness is silence. That silence is expressed in that famous Christmas song that probably all of you have heard in one way or the other. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. So when we sit on our cushion, we deeply enter into that silence in which we let those thoughts of our ordinary mind, all worries, all anxiety, all the things we hold on to, just become quiet and melt away. So as Valerie mentioned, I have a teacher in Taiwan, Master Shindao, and in our Buddhist monastery in Taiwan, listening to silence is the main practice during a retreat, and a retreat goes either 1 month or 7 weeks. And so in that silence, we invite all those distracting thoughts to listen to silence with us, to enter into silence with us, not pursuing them, not rejecting them, but just simply allowing them to dissolve in silence. Then the silence has no boundaries whatsoever. It fills the heaven with the sun, the moon, and the stars, the planets. It fills the earth with all the mountains, rivers, valleys, trees, and flowers. It fills our sitting, our walking, our standing, our lying down, our laughing, our crying, our dancing, our getting up. Everything is in this deep silence, is that silence. We know that Buddha Shakyamuni sat in silence for 6 years. And he sat in that dark and fertile night, quiet night, under the Bodhi tree until he saw the light of the morning star rising in the east. And Henry, in one of his talks, quoted Pema Chodron, who wrote that in that night, those arrows in that darkness, the arrows that were sent by Mara, the naughty one, to keep the Buddha from awakening, were all transformed into flowers. And beholding that light of the morning star, the Buddha awakened. The light of the morning star, the Bodhi tree, every single leaf was shining, the ground under him, every blade of grass shining. To come back to the quote of the Gospel of Luke about the shepherds in the field, the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were sore afraid. Well, the Buddha was not afraid. He realized that this light of the morning star is his own light, one shining. There is no more distance or separation. And the nature of that realization is expressed in the Denko, where he says, or the transmission of light, where he says, Today, I and the great earth and all beings have simultaneously achieved the way. Or I and the great earth and all beings simultaneously achieved the way, in another translation. So right here, right now, achieving the way together with the whole universe and all beings. It can only happen right here and now. There is no other time. Darkness and light, one fact. I, the great earth and all beings, just one existence. And in another expression, the Buddha says, between heaven and earth, only I am holy, or only I am the honored one. And that, of course, is no longer this small I-me mind talking. That has completely dropped away in the light of the morning star. It has never existed in the first place. So then, who is really speaking? Who is saying this? So I want to share another experience of seeing the light in the darkness, namely that of Thomas Merton. So he was a Trappist monk who became well known in 1948 through the publication of his memoir, The Seven-Story Mountain, which is a book that actually became a bestseller. But when Merton entered this very austere monastery in Kentucky as a young man, he longed to live as a hermit, to drown out this world and become a nobody. But his abbot ordered him to write down his autobiography and his spiritual reflections, which then became many books and lifted him out of his desired anonymity. And so then, after 10 years as a hermit in 1958, Merton had an experience in downtown Kentucky while he was out on an errand, and that's an experience that transformed his entire life. He describes it as follows. In Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all of these people, that they were mine and I was theirs, that we could not be alien to each other, even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world. And so this liberation from the illusory difference was such a relief and such a joy to me that I almost laughed out loud, as if the sorrows and stupidities of the human condition could overwhelm me, now that I realized what we all are. If only everybody could realize this, but it cannot be explained. There is no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. And then it was if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts, where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the very core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If only all they could see themselves as they really are. If only all of us could see each other that way all the time. There would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty or greed. So without knowing about Merton at the time at all, my own experience that Yamada Kon Woshi confirmed as a Kensho experience very much reflected Merton's experience. So Kensho literally means seeing one's nature. It's the expression I had quoted in the beginning of the talk, to enlighten one's heart and mind and seeing one's nature. Kensho. So at that moment, during my retreat, I was struggling with the Koan Mu, and then suddenly I experienced a softening, palpable, a softening, a tenderness, an opening of the heart. And then I saw my fellow Zen students in the retreat all in a light. The room, the floors, the walls, the students, everybody was filled with that light, radiating from inside out, outside in, I don't know. And there was clearly a light of love. And what happened is that I cried with remorse because I hadn't seen that clearly before. And at the same time, I wanted to laugh out loud like Morton and raise everybody up and say, why are you sitting here so seriously? Don't you know that you are light? A shining light? So the Buddha, after his enlightenment, sat under the Bodhi tree in amazement for 1 week, until the story tells that the god Indra came and reminded him to get up and to go back to the world and share what he has experienced. And so then returning back to the world, the Buddha radiated this light of love and compassion, of peace and joy, which attracted people everywhere. And that light really is our true nature. And just as Merton says, if only we knew that. And so in a similar way, Merton's own experience led him to a new attitude of compassion and active engagement in the world, really beyond the walls of his monastery. And at that time in the 70s, it was a great unrest in society. Racism, nuclear armament, the Vietnam War. No, it was in the 60s. And so Merton also started to deeply engage in dialogue with the religions of the East, particularly in Buddhism, with Buddhism. And unfortunately, he passed away on his first trip to India during a conference on monasticism in Bangkok, apparently by electrocution, we don't know exactly. But so to look at the example of the Buddha and Merton, their engagement after their experience, have we asked ourselves what good anyone's enlightenment would be if there wasn't a community, a sangha to share that with and engage in? Or would it even be possible to awaken in the first place without a sangha there, a community? And have you ever asked yourself what the Sangha consists of? We had a very beautiful discussion about that, I think, about 2 weeks ago. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind is the threefold jewel: the Buddha, the Sangha, and the Dhamma, the teaching. But what is really this community of practitioners? So now, at this time of the year, between Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, it's certainly, that community is certainly composed of our family and friends, all the people we meet when we do perhaps our holiday shopping and so on. So do we have the eyes to see the light shining in them? Are we grateful? And if there's any darkness, then are we able to transform that? To let our own light shine? I like to quote this case 86 of the Mumonkan, or the Gateless Gate, by Unmon, where he says, everything has its own light. If you try to see it, everything is darkness. What's everybody's light? And then later, in the place of the disciples, he said, the halls and the gate. So here Unmon is reminding us that everything, without any exceptions, has its own light. A universal sangha of light, the walls, the floors, the windows, the flowers, the sky, the trees, the mountains, rivers, the great wide earth. That is our true sangha, in which we are never alone. But then he says, and that's strange, how come if we try to see it, it's only darkness? What does that mean? So this light of our true nature, of course, cannot be seen in the ordinary sense of the subject-object separation. It doesn't mean that I'm sitting here seeing a light somewhere outside. When Buddha Shakyamuni awakened with the light of the morning star, he realized, he experienced, he embodied that light of the morning star as his own light, as his own true nature, as the true nature of each and everything in the universe. It's unborn, it's empty, completely of content or hindrances, nothing there at all, nothing. And at the same time, just that, the wall, the floors, the cushions, Valerie, Scott, Maria, Nancy, each and every one of us. And Umman says the halls, the gate, the birds, the mountains. So this again is interesting. The Chinese character for seeing one's nature, the seeing is a character which is composed of an eye on 2 feet. To see means to embody. So then, what good would this passage of the prophet Isaiah about the great light shining in the darkness do to anyone if there was just a story from the past, a story that perhaps we reject or accept? What good would it do if it didn't point out from the beginning what we clearly are, what we have always been? A shining light that is completely unborn and therefore can never perish. A light that we embody, that is every single thing in this universe is embodying. So I want to end my talk with an interesting story that Annie Dillard relates in her book Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. And she speaks about a girl which was blind from birth and then regained sight after an operation. And this girl is shown a tree for the first time. And very astonished, she calls it the tree with the lights in it. So this girl who had been blind from birth, that's what I see, has never developed this subject-object split, which happens in ordinary seeings. And Dillard's comment is that she herself spent years searching for the trees with the light in it, desiring that same awe that the girl experienced when she saw it. And she writes that she saw it one day out of the blue, and that woke her up to her true calling as a writer. So I would like to invite all of us in this dark night to just be with that silence, be with that light, melt into it, realizing that is our true nature, that luminous darkness that we experience when we have no agendas beyond the present moment, when our heart is open and tender. That's when we are able to see not only the trees with the lights in them, but each and everyone's faces this whole universe in the darkness, at the same time based in light. And I want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you for being here, to being such a light, actually that's shown the way to us to come to Santa Fe, so that we can experience more of this Sangha, this beautiful Sangha here in Mountain Cloud, all of you here in the cloud and over and beyond, we are connected universally. And with that light, to really embrace whatever suffering we encounter in our daily life, just if it's just a smile and giving a hug and just being grateful for everyone that we encounter on our way. The other day, and I want to end with that, we came out from, I think it was a concert in the cathedral, and there was a lady sitting outside just looking at her. And we went to her and said if she had some need, and she said, yeah, well, I could be helped with something. And I just reached out and hugged her, and she hugged back. There was such a light. Of course, we gave more than the hug, but I think the hug was the important part. Thank you.